In a small Michigan town known more for its quiet evenings than crime scenes, a battered shoe in an evidence bag sparked the beginning of a story no one was prepared for. It was nondescript, faded, muddy, and torn at the sole. Just another item in the growing pile of evidence connected to the disappearance of 19-year-old Grace Collins, missing for 47 days. Police had combed forests, rivers, highways. The media buzzed with speculation. Had she run away? Been abducted? Was it foul play, or something worse? Grace's parents appeared on local television begging for answers. Volunteers held candlelight vigils. Time dragged on. Hope flickered. Then came the breakthrough. During evidence cataloging, a forensics assistant noticed something odd about Grace's left shoe. The insole had been glued twice, but part of it was lifting. When pried open, inside was a folded scrap of paper, written in smudged pencil. He says he'll kill me if I scream. Help me, please. Grace. It was real. A desperate, final cry. Grace was last seen leaving her part-time job at Lace's Diner. Surveillance footage showed her walking to her car, waving goodbye to the dishwasher. But she never made it home. The car was later found unlocked in a grocery store parking lot 3 blocks away, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. There were no signs of struggle, no fingerprints, and no witnesses. The community was shaken. A seemingly random disappearance with no trail. This didn't happen in Maple Brook. When the note was found, everything changed. It confirmed what everyone feared. Grace hadn't left on her own. She was being held against her will, and still might be alive. The shoe was immediately sent for DNA and trace analysis. The fibers showed signs of insulation, suggesting she had been held in a basement or crawl space. Investigators re-interviewed everyone in her life, co-workers, neighbors, old friends. Then they got their first big lead. A delivery driver remembered seeing Grace speaking to a man outside her car, tall, with a beard, wearing a maintenance uniform. He thought it was her boyfriend. Grace didn't have one. The delivery driver helped a sketch artist create a composite image. It was released to the public. Within hours, multiple anonymous tips pointed to one man, Roy Denner, 42, a former maintenance worker for a private property management company. He'd recently been fired for inappropriate behavior, but had kept his old uniform. Police pulled his file. He had no violent criminal record, just petty theft and trespassing. But something stood out. Years earlier, he'd been a suspect in another disappearance. A girl named Lila Brewer had gone missing in 2012, also last seen walking home from work. Her case was never solved. Roy lived just outside town in a cluttered ranch house with covered windows and cameras on the eaves. No warrant yet. No solid evidence. Just suspicion. But Grace's note gave police probable cause. Armed with a warrant, police raided Roy's home. What they found was disturbing. The basement was soundproofed. The windows were bricked over. Chains were bolted to the walls. And in a locked room, a mattress, stained sheets, and a single plastic bin containing women's clothing, including a name tag from Lace's Diner. Grace wasn't there, but they knew she had been. Roy was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping. He denied everything, claimed he didn't know Grace. Never met her, he said calmly, as if reading from a script. But the note in the shoe, paired with the uniform and clothing, told a different story. Then came a breakthrough. Inside his garage freezer, police found a cell phone encased in ice. It was Grace's. Forensics recovered partial data, including a chilling 17-second audio recording of Grace whispering, "Please, if anyone finds this, I'm at the house near the water tower." Roy lived less than 400 yards from Maple Brook's old water tower. The audio clip ignited public outrage. Grace had been so close. People had driven past that water tower for weeks, never imagining a horror was unfolding nearby. But still, no Grace. A search team combed Roy's property again. In the crawl space under the stairs, they found a second note, wrapped in duct tape, inside a child's toy. "He took me to the woods once, north of Route 16. I left a ribbon on a branch. Officers rushed to the wooded area. It was vast, but 2.3 miles in, near a clearing, they found it, a pink ribbon tied to a pine branch. They began to dig. Beneath 2 feet of soil, a wooden crate. Inside, Grace. Alive. Barely. She was emaciated, bruised, eyes wide with fear. She whispered only one word, "Run." Grace was rushed to the hospital. Her condition was critical. But she was alive, and her mind was sharp. Detectives, doctors, and trauma counselors worked carefully with her over days. Grace detailed how Roy abducted her, drugged her, and held her captive. He played music constantly to drown out noise. He forced her to write letters to her family claiming she had run away. She never stopped trying to escape. That note in the shoe, she'd hidden it after managing to briefly remove her footwear while Roy was asleep. It was her only shot. A message in a bottle, left in plain sight. Grace described multiple failed attempts to alert neighbors through basement windows, but no one saw her. Roy had controlled every move. She said the woods were his plan B. If he thought police were getting close, he'd bury her alive. And he almost did. Grace's story reopened cold cases. Investigators dug into Roy's past. The 2012 case of Lila Brewer resurfaced. Records showed Roy had serviced an apartment building near where Lila worked. Her body was never found. A missing person database search revealed a pattern. 3 women over 10 years, all with similar profiles. Young, brunette, working part-time jobs, gone without a trace. In his crawl space, they found what looked like trophies, small items, necklaces, keychains, a journal with torn pages. One page simply read, she screamed. I said no. Roy was charged with multiple counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, unlawful confinement. More charges were pending. Roy's trial was explosive. The defense painted him as a misunderstood loner, a man who had mental health issues and was not responsible for his actions. But the prosecution dismantled this narrative. They showed the jury Grace's audio, the note in the shoe, the ribbon, her testimony. Grace, now stronger, took the stand. Her words brought the courtroom to silence. He thought I was invisible, but I made myself seen. The jury deliberated for just 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. The case shook the nation. News outlets dubbed Grace the girl who wrote her way out. Survivor groups rallied behind her. Laws were proposed: mandatory property checks for tenants, better oversight of dismissed workers in residential maintenance. Grace's story became a symbol of resilience, of fear turned into strength, of a voice refusing to be silenced. She started a foundation, Silent Inc., supporting victims who can't speak up. Her first public message? A scanned copy of the note she hid in her shoe, captioned, "My last words became my first step back." As Grace healed, she continued speaking out. In interviews, podcasts, school visits. She didn't shy away from the horrors, but emphasized the hope. "I'm not here because I was strong every day," she said. "I'm here because on the worst day of my life, I wrote a note." She urged people to pay attention to the small things. The shoe that didn't match. The quiet girl who stopped showing up. The scream you think you imagined. Her final plea: if you see something, say something. If you feel something's off, trust your gut. You might be someone's only chance. If Grace's story moved you, don't stay silent. Share this video. Support organizations helping survivors. Subscribe for more real, haunting stories, because behind every headline is a voice fighting to be heard. After the trial, psychologists and criminal profilers were brought in to analyze Roy Denner's behavior. What made him so meticulous? So invisible? Turns out, Roy wasn't just lucky, he was deliberate. He studied his victims' routines. He had surveillance logs going back years. Notes like works late Thursdays and parents out of town on weekends were found in a journal tucked behind his furnace. He was methodical. He even used burner phones to create fake dating profiles, engaging girls with friendly messages to test how vulnerable or isolated they were. Grace had ignored one such message a week before she disappeared. Experts labeled him a high-functioning opportunist predator, someone who blended in, manipulated without detection, and escalated only when he believed he wouldn't get caught. But he made one mistake. He underestimated Grace's will to live. As the dust settled, serious questions emerged. How did Roy go undetected for so long? The police department faced backlash. It was revealed that Roy had been reported at least 3 times by women in the past. Once for peering into an apartment window, twice for following someone in a parking lot. Each time, no follow-up. The maintenance company that fired him never alerted authorities about his conduct. No shared records. No system of warning other employers. It was a systemic failure. Grace's father stood at a town hall and said, "The note saved my daughter." But the system let her get taken. Reforms began. A new task force formed. But for many families, the damage was already done. The renewed focus on Roy led to shocking discoveries. Detectives revisited unsolved missing persons cases in 3 states. 2 matched Roy's timeline. One involved a 17-year-old named Jamie Lynn Park. vanished from a gas station outside Toledo in 2014. In storage units linked to Roy's rental history, authorities found Jamie's hairbrush. Her DNA was matched to strands recovered from Roy's crawl space. She was declared deceased, but her body was never found. Grace, now recovered, wrote a letter to Jamie's mother. In it, she said, "I think she was strong, and she probably fought. I'm just sorry she wasn't heard in time." That letter went viral. The pain, and the bond between victims, was undeniable. The deeper police dug, the more disturbing the discoveries. Roy had owned a plot of land in rural Indiana for 5 years. He sold it shortly before Grace's abduction. When police excavated it, they found clothing remnants, women's shoes, and a bracelet with the inscription "To my sunshine, love, Dad." It belonged to Lila Brewer. Her family finally had some form of closure, but the lack of a body haunted them. The FBI classified Roy as a serial offender. Quiet, mobile, organized. A man whose trail was paved in misdirection. And the handwritten note in a shoe had cracked it all wide open. A chilling turn occurred when a photo was found in Roy's hard drive. A girl tied to a chair, looking directly at the camera. She wasn't Grace. She wasn't Lila. She wasn't Jamie. She was unidentified. The FBI released the photo publicly. Tips poured in. Finally, a match. Haley Vernon, 16, reported missing in 2017 from Illinois. But her parents had long assumed she ran away. Now they knew she didn't. Roy never mentioned her. Her body was never found. But the image, its starkness, the quiet terror in her face, became the centerpiece of the case's darkest chapter. There were more victims than anyone had imagined. Despite the verdict, Roy filed an appeal. His lawyers claimed media interference and emotional manipulation tainted the jury. Grace was asked to testify again. She agreed. But this time, she stood taller, clearer, more unshaken. She read her original note aloud to the courtroom. Then she stared Roy in the eyes. "You don't get to undo the truth," she said. "You don't get to bury me again." The appeal was denied. The courtroom applauded. Grace didn't flinch. Grace launched a podcast titled Soul Witness, named after the note in her shoe. It featured interviews with families of Roy's possible victims, survivors of abduction, forensic experts, and policymakers. Each episode was more than storytelling. It was advocacy. One listener wrote, "She saved lives." Not just with that note, but with her voice. Donations poured into her foundation, Silent Ink. Survivors wrote in daily. Some said they were too afraid to speak, until Grace did. And yet, she never saw herself as a hero. "I didn't choose bravery," she often said. "I chose survival." A final search of Roy's mother's old cabin, where he spent weekends, uncovered something shocking. Behind a false wall in the basement was a soundproofed room with shackles and a hidden camera setup. There were stains on the mattress, a rusted tool set, and in one drawer, dozens of burned discs, each labeled with a date and initials. Most were too damaged to play, but 2 were salvaged. They showed Haley Vernon, and another girl who's still unidentified. The FBI believes Roy may have trafficked his victims before killing them, and the true number of victims may never be known. Maplebrook erected a plaque outside City Hall, in honor of those who were silenced and the one who spoke. Grace attended the unveiling. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry. "I was just a girl," she said. "But now I'm a voice." The town held annual vigils, changed safety protocols, and introduced education programs about recognizing early warning signs of predatory behavior. Parents talked to their kids more. Teachers listened harder. And every so often, someone would leave a note, folded inside a shoe, on the town memorial. Just 2 words written on each one. "I'm here." Grace published a memoir, The Note in the Shoe. It became a bestseller. In its final chapter, she writes, "I used to believe silence was safety. That if I stayed quiet, I'd live. But silence nearly killed me. Words saved me. The smallest ones, scribbled in fear." She ended her story with the note, reproduced in her own handwriting, and the words, "To whoever finds this, you are not alone. Say something. Write it down. Because someone is listening." And now, we are. If Grace's courage inspired you, honor her voice. Bell subscribe for more real, raw, and haunting true crime stories. Loudspeaker share this video. You never know who might need to hear it. Memo comment below. What would you have done in Grace's shoes? Red Heart # support victims foundations like Silent Ink. Because sometimes, the smallest voice leaves the loudest echo.